Deep within the snow-covered plains of Bavaria, Germany, lies a dark stain on human history, a story so deeply unsettling that even after a century, the mere mention of its name sends shivers down the spine of those who dare to look into it. This is the story of Hinterkaifeck, a remote, lonely farmstead situated nearly 1 hour away from the nearest civilization. In the chilly months of early 1922, this farm was inhabited by 6 people. Andreas Gruber, a cold and stubborn old man, his wife, Cecilia, their widowed daughter, Victoria. Victoria's 2 young children, 7-year-old Cecilia and 2-year-old Josef, and finally, their newly hired maid, Maria. To the outside world, they were just an ordinary, reclusive farming family. But behind the closed doors of this isolated house, something unspeakable was brewing. The air around the farm felt heavy, unwelcoming, as if the land itself knew that a nightmare was approaching. But the nightmare didn't arrive in a flash. No, it crept in slowly, leaving terrifying clues in the thick winter snow. Clues that the Gruber family chose to ignore until it was too late. The terror truly began 6 months before the tragedy. The family's previous maid packed her bags in absolute panic and left the farm. Why? Because she claimed the house was haunted. She swore that she constantly heard footsteps coming from the attic and felt a malicious, unseen presence watching her every move. The Grubers laughed it off, dismissing her fears as mere superstition. But by March 1922, even the stubborn Andreas Gruber could no longer deny that something was deeply wrong. One morning, after a brutal blizzard, Andreas walked outside into the fresh, untouched snow. What he saw made his blood run cold. A clear set of footprints leading from the thick forest straight towards the farm's machine house. Andreas carefully examined the footprints. He looked around the vast open fields, and there was no one in sight. But then, he noticed the most terrifying detail of all. There were footprints leading to the house, but there were absolutely no footprints leading back into the woods. Whoever made those tracks was still inside the property, hidden somewhere in the shadows. Instead of calling the police, Andreas searched the barn and the house himself. He found nothing. Days later, a strange, unfamiliar newspaper appeared on his porch. No one in the family had bought it, and the postman hadn't delivered it. Then keys to the house vanished into thin air. And finally, Andreas discovered deep scratches on the lock of the tool shed, as if someone had tried to force it open from the inside. That night, Andreas stood in the dark hallway, listening. Above him, from the dark, dusty attic, he heard the distinct, heavy sound of floorboards creaking, footsteps moving right above his head. Yet he still refused to look for outside help, a fatal mistake that would seal their doom. On March 31st, 1922, a new maid named Maria Baumgartner arrived at the farm. It was her very first day on the job. She was relieved to finally have employment, completely unaware that she had just walked directly into a slaughterhouse. As night fell over Bavaria, the temperature dropped below freezing. The sky turned pitch black. Inside the house, the candles were blown out, and the family went to bed. We will never know exactly what happened in those dark hours, but investigators believe the killer was already waiting in the shadows of the barn. One by one, a mysterious force began to lure the family members out of the warm house and into the cold, pitch-black barn. First, the elderly wife, Cecilia. Then the husband, Andreas. Next, their daughter, Victoria. And finally, the little 7-year-old girl, Cecilia. Imagine the terror, walking into a dark barn only to be met by a silent shadow holding a heavy, sharp farming tool known as a mattock, a pickaxe-like weapon. Before they could even scream, the weapon came crashing down. One by one, with brutal mechanical precision, their skulls were shattered. The killers stacked their lifeless bodies on top of each other, covering them with straw and an old door to hide the gruesome scene. But the horror wasn't over. The killer then calmly walked into the main house. He found the innocent maid, Maria, in her bedroom and took her life. Finally, he walked over to the crib of 2-year-old baby Joseph and ended the family lineage forever. For the next 4 days, the village near Hinterkaifeck remained completely peaceful. No one knew about the massacre, but what happened during those 4 days is perhaps the most twisted part of this entire mystery. The killer did not run away. After brutally murdering 6 people, including a baby, the killer lived inside the house with the corpses for nearly a week. Neighbors later reported seeing smoke rising from the chimney over the weekend. Someone had been cooking meals in the kitchen. Someone had eaten the family's bread and meat. Even more shocking, when investigators eventually entered the farm, they found that all the cattle and farm animals had been carefully fed and watered every single day. The killer was taking care of the farm, relaxing in the warmth of the house, while the 6 bodies lay rotting just a few feet away. On April 4th, a group of neighbors finally decided to check on the farm because little Cecilia hadn't showed up to school and the mail was piling up. They walked into the barn, moved the blood-soaked straw, and discovered the horrific stack of bodies. The village was thrown into absolute chaos and terror. A monster was among them. The German police launched a massive investigation. They questioned over 100 suspects. They even took the severed heads of the victims to clairvoyants and psychics, desperate for any supernatural clue. But every single lead led to a dead end. Who could have done this? Some theories suggest it was Victoria's husband, Carl Gabriel, who was reported killed in World War I, but many believed he secretly survived and returned to seek bloody revenge. Other theories point to a wealthy neighbor who had a dark, complicated relationship with the family. But the most chilling theory is that the killer was a complete stranger, a phantom who lived in their attic for weeks, watching them eat, watching them sleep, learning their routines before finally deciding to come down and end their lives. Today, the Hinterkaifeck farm no longer stands. It was completely demolished shortly after the murders, but the mystery remains buried deep in the soil of Bavaria. No one was ever arrested. No one was ever convicted. The identity of the monster who fed the cattle and slept in the beds of his victims remains a dark, unsolved secret. What do you think happened in that lonely barn? Leave your theories in the comments below.